This is the final part of a mini-series where I refactor a data science project. If you haven't watched the first and second part yet, I put a link to those videos in the description below. In the first two parts, I've mainly made some changes so that the code better uses Python's newer features, and I've created a runner class that has as the main responsibility running the training and testing of the experiment. Today I'm going to complete the work and integrate the runner class into the main code. And let's talk about a few things you can do to improve where you store configurations. If you want to become better at making these kinds of software design decisions yourself, I have a free guide for you that describes in 7 steps how I generally go through this process. You can get it at ArjanCodes.com/design guide. It's a pretty short read. I've tried to keep it to the point and pretty simple, so you can just go through it quickly and take whatever you need from it, and then hopefully it helps you improve your process. So ArjanCodes.com/design guide, and the link is also in the description below. Now, let's finish this refactoring. So one more thing that I'd like to do in the main part is actually clean up this main function a little bit. You see, it's still responsible for a lot of things. It creates all these objects, and then it's also responsible for this actual loop. So what I'd actually like to do is to put at least the parts here inside the loop and put that in a separate function so that it looks a bit cleaner. So I'm going to copy this code. I'm going to put that function inside this running.py file, because this is basically where concerned with everything that's about running the experiment. So let's add a function here that's called run epoch. And we're going to put this stuff in here. So this is going to run the epoch, and that's going to need a couple of things. It will need the test runner. It's going to need the train runner. It's going to need the experiment tracker. And because it's logging epoch data, it needs to know the ID of the current epoch. So let's call that epoch ID. And that's an int. This is what it actually needs. And I simply need to rename these things to epoch ID, like so. And let's do the same here. And let's do the same here, like so. And what it finally needs here, and this is actually something I'm going to change in a minute as well, is a parameter that tells us how many epochs there are. So I'm also going to add an extra parameter here called epoch total. And let's move here and then change this to epoch total. And this we don't need anymore either. So there we go. And now in the main part, I can simply call this function instead of doing all that stuff here. So here I'm doing a run epoch, and that gets the test runner and the train runner and the experiment tracker and the epoch ID. And let's also call this epoch ID here for consistency. And now this we can delete. We don't need all this stuff anymore because the run epoch is taking care of that. There we go. And I think, yeah, that's the complete thing. We also need to pass the total number of epochs here, and there's a weird thing here with h params, which I don't really like. I think it's really a non-standard way of doing this, so I prefer to actually just use constants here, and that's way more simpler than doing it like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a couple of constants here that we're going to use. So I'm just going to add here an epoch count, which equals 20. And then I'm going to add the other parameters as well. So there's also an LR. There we go. And then we also have a batch size, which equals 128. And we have a log path. I'll talk about that in a minute, which we're also going to need later on. Actually, the optimizer here is also a parameter, but it's not being used, so I just remove it like so. And then here, instead of this hparam stuff, I can just write batch size. And the same thing here. There we go. And let's see, here we have the LR thingy. And here we have the epoch count. And then we can also pass it here, epoch count. There we go. And you see here we have the log there. I created a variable for that as well. So let's put that here as well, log path. There we go. This one, we don't need it anymore. And now let's run this code again and just verify that this all just works as we want it to. So it's training, validating, and this seems to go pretty well. Let's stop that process. There we go. As you can see, we already cleaned up the main function a lot. So there's one more thing that I want to change, and that's the way the data is being loaded into the application. And that's basically the way that that loading data is set up. So we have here a file loaddata.py that directly depends on data being in another folder. And this is problematic because if you look at the main file, it seems like this is the set of parameters that this program needs in order to run correctly. But actually, there are parameters hidden inside the load data because the data folder is written explicitly here, including the names of the files. So if you were to change the data, you wanted to run this application with other data, then you would have to look through all of the source code, find out where there were references to this particular data, and then change it there, which is obviously not great. So it's better that all these parameters are in a single place. So what I'm going to do as a final refactor is put the data configuration inside the main file and not inside these source files here. So let me just add the files here. So this is data configuration, and we have a directory, which is data. That's where all the data is located. And then just create constants for each of the file names. So we have test data, which is, and we're going to need pathlib. There we go. And then we need the image names. And I already prepared this, so I'm just going to copy that over here. So these are the 4 files that we're going to need. There we go. And now the only thing we need to do is kind of restructure a bit how data is being loaded. So what I'm going to do here is data dir. I'm going to remove this. I don't want to see that here. And I have my load test data, and what I want to do is pass a parameter, which is the path to the file that we want to load. That's of type path. And this thing we're going to replace with the file path, basically. And then that's load test data. And we can do the same thing for the other loading functions. And you can even make this a bit more generic, so that because load test data is actually almost the same as load train data, except that the number of images is different. So one thing you could do is put these 2 functions together, remove these asserts. You could put them in a separate file containing unit test or a data validation test, and not mix up loading the data with validating the data, which is basically what is happening here. What I actually did is I already prepared this. And so that's what you basically see here, where I have now two functions, one to load image data and another one to load label data, which is the 2 things that you need. And then it's either training data or it's testing data. So when you look at the dataset file, you also see that there is a problem here, that dataset, the MNIST dataset, basically directly depends on these functions from load data, which is also not very nice. So one way to fix that is, let me first remove these imports, because we'll do this slightly differently, is that we're not using these 2 functions to get train and test data loader, but we're just going to create a single function that creates a data loader for us, given a file path. So let's take this function as a template for that. So I'm going to call this create data loader. and that's going to get a batch size. It's going to get a data path, which is of type path. It's going to get a label path because that's also what it needs, data and labels, which is also a path. And then there is one option, which is shuffle, which does happen in the train data, but it doesn't happen in the test data. So we should actually also be able to pass it here. So that's a bool. And let's say default it's true. And then what we're going to do here is that the MNIST initializer is going to get the data that we get from this loader functions that we had. So let me go here and let's say we have the data, and that's load image data, and that's going to get a path. There we go. And we have the label data, and that's load label data. And that's going to get the label path. And label data we can probably also automatically import. And here we're simply going to pass this to the MNIST initializer. Label data, there we go. Shuffle should be the parameter that we pass. There. And the rest should stay more or less the same. So we also need to import path. There we go. And let's look if all is going well. So we have this, and I'll just remove this function. I'll just remove this function here. We don't need it anymore. And there's a couple of other typing errors. I will for now ignore them. So now we have create data loader, and in the main part what we can do now is not do it like this, but actually call the create data loader function instead with different options. And when you do it like that, then basically this is what you're going to get. And let's run this code one more time to make sure that this works, and it doesn't. These ones, they don't exist, obviously. So now let's run this code one more time to verify that this works as it should. And fortunately, it still does. Now, the nice thing is when you now look at the main.py file, we were able to remove basically a lot of the very specific low-level things like scikit-learn and everything. There's still a torch import that we might be able to refactor out of this by creating the optimizer to the runner class, for example. But overall, it's become pretty simple in this way. All the data and all the configuration settings are now also in a single place. If I want to add more or different data files, I can simply change these variables here, and the rest of the code I don't need to change. So that's already a lot cleaner. And also the main function is now much smaller. It basically creates a bunch of loaders and models and runners and experiment trackers, and then it just runs the epochs and flushes the experiment at the end. So also this part is becoming much cleaner in this way, and overall much easier to understand. As you've seen, I haven't really used any design patterns explicitly when I was refactoring this example. A lot of the work concerns splitting the code into separate methods of functions, introducing some abstractions to reduce coupling, such as how we refactor the experiment tracker class, for example, and make sure that configuration settings are in a single place. If you have any other suggestions for improving this code, let me know in the comments below. I'd say the main takeaway in data science projects is that the data is central and that you should design your application around how data flows. That means you can use the information expert principle to assign responsibilities close to the data that it needs. A very good example of this is the runner class, because it's responsible for running the experiment. It's also the information expert in the sense that it keeps track of the metrics and the intermediate data that it gets back while running the experiment. So design your code around the data. That's the first way to think about it. You can also think about it differently and consider how objects and modules communicate with each other. And you generally want to design the system in such a way that the amount of data, different data, parameters that need to be passed between these modules, flow between these modules, should be minimized. In the first version of the example, you saw this problem in dataset.py, where we had to directly import very specific data loading functions. A similar problem occurred in the original Main.py file, where the for loop, the code inside the for loop, depends on lots of variables that were defined outside of it. If two pieces of code communicate and they send lots and lots of different data to each other, you might want to rethink your design and think about a way to minimize the communication that's needed and basically store the process closer to the data that it needs. Another thing that I think really helps in managing more complex code is using type hints. As you saw, they're not always properly implemented in the libraries that you use, but at least you can try to define them properly in your own code, and that helps avoid some problems like the mixing up of reals and floats that we saw in the example. I hope you enjoyed this closer look at software design for data science projects. If you'd like me to do more of this content in the future, please let me know in the comments below. Thanks again to Mark Todisco for supplying the original example code. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, consider subscribing if you want to watch more of my content. Thanks for watching, take care, and see you soon.